It's the dawn of the 16th century. The Vejiha branch of the Sioux Nation is going off on its own, with the Quapaw heading south down the Mississippi River, the Osage commanding the Ozarks, and the Kaw, or Kanze, ruling the plains. They do this for 300 years, up until the Louisiana Purchase. President Jefferson sends Lewis and Clark and their Corps of Discovery to explore the new land. West of St. Louis, they spy the Kanze people, who they are much afraid of meeting, due to their reputation as great warriors. The tribe befriends them and helps them. That relationship continues, and 20 years later, they enter into a treaty where the tribe cedes 90% of their land, and they retain the western portion seen here. It's 2 million acres along the north side of the Kansas River. They also secure 23 square mile lots for 23 members of the tribe who are the offspring of mixed race marriages. This creates a fissure in the tribe between the two groups, but it's difficult to miss because they're neighbors. The tribe had previously controlled 20 million acres up into Iowa, Missouri, and a lot of Kansas. For some context, if this was a state, it would be somewhere between the size of Maine and Indiana. While there's only 1,200 Kanze members, they controlled who entered Kansas. And that's why Kansas is called Kansas. If you were heading into that area and you asked where you were, you would find that you were in Kanze's territory. They cede 20 million acres in exchange for $70,000, or 1/3 of a cent per acre. This is the equivalent of 12.5 cents per acre today, or then and now, less than the price of a piece of candy. The government added articles that they would protect the tribe as if injury had been done to a white man if they were attacked, and they also added language that the Kanzes would provide safe passage along their river. Now this is very important because in treaty language, nothing is an accident, and we have to remember that the Bureau of Indian Affairs is not in the interior at this time, but the Department of War. This treaty is a war instrument, and the US Army is not very strong in this territory at this time. It's another 2 years before Fort Leavenworth is stood up. And so what the US government is doing is they're taking the current army in Kansas, which is the Kanzes, and they're making them the guardians of this river for safe passage along the river, as well as a part of the Oregon Trail. And for 20 years, the tribe thrives. They had been previously in a state of stagnation and population decline. They were at 1,200 people at this time. They have good harvests, successful hunting, and the tribe grows to 1,588, which is larger than it had been in any of the lifetimes of the people living then. On the land known as the Kaw Miles, on those individual square mile lots, the mixed race members of the tribe also begin to do well. Here we see buildings on what is called Kaw Mile 4, and we see these buildings as well as Papan's Ferry. Now this ferry carries people north to the Oregon Trail and south to the Santa Fe Trail. In 1845, the annuity ends, and with increased contact from other tribes as well as Western travelers and settlers, the forest is beginning to be depleted at too rapid a rate, and so they want to make another deal, or they're willing to make another deal, specifically to go farther west. They want to go farther west from where they are to be closer to their hunting grounds, but also because it's a good spot along the Kansas River. They go from 2 million acres to 256,000 acres, but not into neighboring property. They wind up southwest, and this creates a gulf of 53 miles between them and their landed relatives. The treaty is signed by 29 men, 2 Bureau of Indian Agent Commissioners, 8 witnesses, some of whom are married into the tribe and will move to the new reservation, and 19 Kanze who mark their names with an X. Now, in one generation, the Kanze are now living on just 1% of what they used to. And as they settle into the Neosho Valley, the land becomes designated for white settlement. And the government begins a plan to remove all Native Americans from the state of Kansas. And then pestilence comes in the form of smallpox. It kills hundreds of them. And then there are white invasions. First, due to the Kansas-Nebraska Act, where those coming in begin a war with each other over the issue of slavery. And then for the gold rush in Pikes Peak, Colorado. In just 10 years since moving there, the traffic along the Santa Fe Trail goes from 12,000 people to 100,000 people, with the latter group being a lot of gold prospectors. Now, up north, this is very positive, because along Kaw Mile 4, for example, they can make a lot of money off of lodging, meals, laundry, and crossing the river. Down south, it's the opposite. They're not paying for lodging and meals. They're squatting, hunting, chopping down trees, and they're urinating and defecating. An altercation leads to 2 Kaw men being lynched and hung in the town square, and very shortly after that, another treaty is made. And it begins quite ominously with having now more land than necessary, and desiring to promote settled habits. They want to abolish their tenure in common, their reservation, and own an interest in the land. Now, unlike people who want to own an interest, somehow 2/3 of the land are forfeited. Heads of household are formed, and they are given 40 acres each, and their addresses are recorded with the government. Other language in this treaty states that to relieve them of the annoyance and embarrassment of debts they have, surplus lands will be sold to pay off the debts, and it's also said that the Kanze can engage in industry. And then why would this be even mentioned, that they can engage in industry? Can't people engage in industry? And well, the reason for it is that not always with the American Indians. They were often restricted in what they could do, who they could even buy and sell to. And now they're being told that they can engage in industry, which is quite convenient, being that the United States is in the middle of the biggest depression it's ever seen. And 2 years before, the Panic of 1857 began, when a bank in California shut down, and a new technology called Morse code sent the news across the country and then to London, causing a multi-continental panic and run on banks. And it leads to a 2-year depression and then another 2 years of recession. And consequently, places like small towns in Kansas, like this one, were affected greatly, and this land couldn't be sold. Additionally, heirs of the 23 Kaw miles are to receive 40 acres each as well. And a big part of this is that the north side of the Kansas River is being more greatly settled. Railroads are coming in, they're getting charters, they're laying tracks, and they really need these people who own this land, who have deeds to this land, they need them out of there. The tribe is signed by 32 people, 28 Kanze sign, 27 of them mark their names with an X, 1 with a signature. At this time, the Kaw population goes from 1588 to 866, and 63 of them are of mixed race origin. Those from the Kaw miles, called the mixed bloods, they are multiplying, while the full bloods are just about cut in half. And then comes the Treaty of 1872, a treaty that they are forced into. Under protest and duress, 553 members of the Kaw Nation are forced into Oklahoma. When they can't finish the trip, they are carried in wagons and dropped off into the land of their Osage cousins. Years earlier, when their Osage cousins had reached Oklahoma, they saw the desolation, they concluded that they'd never be able to grow anything there, and they were glad, because it was so bad that they figured no one would take it from them. But the government does take something. In 1873, the annuity from the 1846 treaty does not arrive. The 1846 treaty had stated that they would be paid $10,000 a year based on $200,000 principal that was being held in trust for them. It doesn't arrive. They have to go find a way to survive through that winter. The next year they go up to Topeka to collect their annuity in person, and they also try to recruit other members, other relatives of theirs to come down to be counted, because it's a little small here, but the 1846 treaty says that the $200,000 will be paid out pro rata, meaning that if they have 1,588 people, they'll get the whole $200,000. If they don't, they'll get a percentage. In 1876, the principal on that treaty is not paid nearly in full. 1887, national education laws come into effect that allow federal agents to forcibly enter Native American homes who reside supposedly in a foreign country in Oklahoma Territory on their own land, take them out of their homes, put them into boarding schools where there was a lot of physical abuse. They were restricted, they were not allowed to speak their own language, and they were often trafficked for labor purposes in the name of teaching them trades. By 1888, the Kaw population is 194. Now, one may ask, why did the Kaw agree to any of these treaties? And there's a few conclusions we can come to. In 1825, there was a great deal of settler encroachment, but also tribal encroachment. A lot of the tribes from the east were being forced this way. So in some sense, they might have seen the writing on the wall, but also they would have wanted to get away from them, come to their western hunting grounds or closer to it. In 1846, they were, again, more greatly encroached upon. More tribes were being moved in. The Oregon Trail, as well as the Kansas River, was bringing a lot of settlers west near them. But also from 1825 to 1846, they had had some success with population growth. They had the comfort of these regular annuity payments. So with a more great annuity payment of $10,000 a year, plus that principal payment that will come a generation and a half later, they might have believed that they were doing what was best for the future of the tribe. But in 1859, there was lawlessness and intimidation. They were very weak. They were having a lot of troubles. That was a treaty, I believe, that they signed under duress. In 1863, there was an attempt to force them into Oklahoma. They refused, and 87 of the braves went and enlisted in the cavalry of the Civil War. 87 went, 63 returned to a tribal population of 670. But then in 1872, they were forced. They were forced and they were given a military escort. Kaw population devastation was systemic and systematic. They had their lands reduced by 90%, and then they had it reduced by another 90%, and this repeated. Access to hunting grounds was denied, and even if they could have gone to those hunting grounds, the government enacted a policy of slaughtering all of the buffalo to extinction. Promised payments failed to arrive, and then their children were stolen from them. Every step the government took was a step on the tribe. And today, there are no full-blooded Kanze. And that was a matter of course. A course set by the government to get rid of them. Thank you.